So it is finally here, the long-awaited Project A from Riot, now officially known as Valorant, and we're finally starting to get some of our first details about the game. We've had some leaks here and there, but they've been pretty minimal. But we had the official launch of the Valorant website, as well as the media blitz that took place afterwards, where a bunch of different media outlets have had access to the game or have different information and spreading it around. And so I wanted to give kind of my take on Valorant and what I think about the game. Now, obviously, I can't think much about the game because I haven't actually played it. I have no hands-on opinion about the game, but I just wanted to give my take on kind of what I'm seeing and kind of what I'm feeling about the game. Now, if you have no idea who I am because you're coming to Valorant from other games outside of Counter-Strike, I am mostly known for my work in the Counter-Strike franchise, and in particular in Counter-Strike Global Offensive, which I've been working with since about 2013. I've served as a commentator, a desk analyst, a freelance writer, and a freelance content creator for various different companies, including E-League, ESL, MLG, PGL, DreamHack, Gfinity. The list goes on and on of different companies I've worked with. I've done content for ESPN, HTC Esports. I've done content for various other places. I've been featured on different podcasts. I've done all kinds of stuff in Counter-Strike and, have a lot of experience with it. And so I'm coming at Valorant from the perspective of someone who is kind of a Counter-Strike diehard. I've even did a lot of commentary and content creation, and I competed in Counter-Strike Source even further back, going back to, say, like 2009 to 2007, even stretching really far back. So that's the perspective I'm coming from. A guy who's competed in Counter-Strike at like a semi-pro level in Counter-Strike Source. Didn't really play very much CSGO competitively, but again, has worked as a commentator, as a desk analyst, as a content creator. So I feel like this game has a lot of roots in Counter-Strike, as far as some of the people who are working on the game have a Counter-Strike background, particularly Volcano, who is a long-time famous professional player in Counter-Strike, as well as a guy who's done some content, different things with it after his playing career. And I'm sure there's other people on the staff who also have that Counter-Strike background. And a lot of the format of the game is very reflective of Counter-Strike, right? I mean, you have the 5-on-5, you have the different, bomb site type things, although they're planning a spike on reactors or something like that, which I think was a really smart branding move, by the way. And it has the economy system. You have, all these different things, even some of the movement mechanics and some of the map layouts, how linear they are, how they're shaped, very much reminiscent of Counter-Strike. I think a lot of people will see that even if they aren't necessarily, Counter-Strike players. And so, yeah, I wanted to just talk about everything I've been seeing from that perspective. And so I'm going to be taking a look at a few different things that I'll put up on screen here to kind of just talk through my thoughts on the game. I think it's going to have a very interesting place in the esports landscape and just in gaming culture. And so definitely wanted to kind of sift through some of the things I've been seeing out there and kind of give my take on them if you're interested in it from the perspective of someone who has worked very heavily in Counter-Strike. So first we can talk about the name of the game, Valorant. What do I think about it? I think it actually is quite nice. I don't really have like a strong opinion in favor of it or against it. I think it's a fine name. I do like the design of it. I like the logo, which I guess we can't really see. If we scroll up here, you can kind of see it here in the corner. I think it's nice, simple, sleek design. I think that's maybe one of the strong suits of Riot as a company is how they design certain things, how they brand certain things. And I think that the branding and the design of it looks great. I think the way that they're just out here right up front saying, it's a 5-on-5 character-based tactical shooter where creativity is your greatest weapon. But I think that they also have emphasized throughout, and one of the key points of this game that separates it from other class-based shooters is that the actual FPS element of the game is what's most forward, right? Compared to a game like Overwatch, where I feel like the skills and alts really dictate team fights and dictate the pace of the game. Whereas I feel like this game, your skills are more like what utility is in Counter-Strike. Some of the skills are very reminiscent of using a smoke grenade, for example, in Counter-Strike. And so I feel like the skills are kind of a supplementary portion to the game, but it still is very much FPS forward. So if you have the better aim, the better shot, the better decision making, the better mechanics, you are going to thrive against someone who is inferior to you in those aspects. Even if they use a skill or something against you, you can still really get around that if you're the better player. And so the skills become useful, like pieces of utility, but they don't necessarily decide how a fight goes or how a round goes. I think that is a brilliant way to balance it. I think it's also neat here, right here at the top, they're telling you that, they're investing in the 128 tick servers. They're guaranteeing at least 30 frames per second on even the most minimum spec computers, although that is quite low, but that they're expecting most people on modern PCs to be able to get, pretty high FPS. And they're also really focusing in on low latency, which is great to see, right? I mean, 128 tick servers is something we've been calling for in Counter-Strike for a long time for matchmaking. So the fact that this game is going to have it right off the bat, is going to be great. I think a lot of people are going to be really happy with that. It's probably going to really improve the performance of the game and how it feels to play matchmaking, whatever they're going to call it. So I am really cool to see that. Also, not listed on here, but what I've been seeing going around is that they have a real big focus on anti-cheat, something that they came out and said even during like the 10-year anniversary of Riot, that they put out that one video that kind of first gave us a look at this game, and they made, you know, anti-cheat at the forefront of the things that they're focusing on, which is also great because no one wants to play against cheaters, right? Now, the next thing we're looking at here is actually the buy menu, and so I think we can learn a lot of information from this buy menu. You know, first off, you know, a lot of similarities to Counter-Strike. You know, the different prices for weapons. You know, you have a certain amount of money, scales depending on how powerful the weapon is and what type of weapon it is. You have light shields, you have heavy shields, is reminiscent of light armor and head armor in Counter-Strike, but it's a little bit simplified, right? There's not so many guns in each category, which I think is great because in Counter-Strike we've run into a problem where some categories have so many guns and many of them don't get used, and then Valve seems pressured to try to make guns more useful instead of just having guns that don't get used, and so it creates this kind of weird dynamic, whereas this game, they've really simplified it a lot. Now, that's not to say that they won't add more guns in the future. They probably will, but from the start, you have, you know, kind of your basic pistol like a Glock or a USP in Counter-Strike that you're going to start with. Then you actually have a sawed-off shotgun as a sidearm, which is kind of neat. We have a sawed-off shotgun in Counter-Strike, but it is actually a shotgun and not a sidearm. But it's kind of neat that you have something like that. There are some other games that have something similar to this. And then you have the Frenzy, which is an auto pistol, which reminds me of a CZ in Counter-Strike. You have the Ghost, which I can't really tell what this corresponds to. Maybe it's like just a stronger semi-automatic pistol, kind of like a P250 or a 5.7 in Counter-Strike. Then you have the Sheriff, which again reminds you a lot of a Deagle, doesn't it? And I imagine that's the role it will play in this game. Then you have, you know, your couple of SMGs, but they don't go crazy with it. You know, you have the Stinger and the Spectre on this buy menu at least. I imagine they'll probably differ in damage and fire rate, but still really be good at close ranges. They'll probably have tighter spreads on recoil. So I'm sure each of them kind of have their place on a trade-off of damage versus fire rate, things of that nature. I don't know, haven't used them, but that's just kind of the vibe I get. Shotguns, you have a base pump action and a base auto shotgun. Sounds good to me. I don't really think you need to fret over having so many different types of shotguns like we have in CS. I think that this is a good start. Then with rifles, yeah, I'm not really sure how this breaks down. I'm not sure if both sides have access to the same rifles or if the rifles are different. I imagine that, you know, in Counter-Strike, you have access to basically the same pistols, the same snipers. So there's some similarities between the two sides, but then there's guns that are unique to the side. And I'm not sure how this game goes with that, but we see the different rifles here. Seems like the Vandal has a very familiar feel to like an AK-47, so it's probably going to be really powerful, but maybe a harder recoil to control, whereas some of the other guns might be a little bit easier to control the recoil, but maybe does a little bit less damage. Maybe there's some fire rate differences, different things like that. It seemed like some of the guns from the film I have seen have an ADS feature, kind of like a Krieg or an AUG in Counter-Strike, and so maybe some of these rifles have that feature and some of them don't, where it's only hip fire, only just using your crosshair. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of differences. I did see one that just seemed like it was a tapping gun, where it's just semi-automatic. There's no auto feature, but maybe does a bit more damage, but obviously the fire rate's decreased because you're having to tap every single shot. So there's probably some trade-offs when it comes to that, but again, fairly simplified. I'm sure each gun will kind of have their own, like, unique skill set that you'll want to use for certain situations, or based on the style of player that you are, without a lot of redundancy, which I think is a nice look. Then you have the snipers, one more weak than the other, so I imagine the Marshal is a lot like the Scout from Counter-Strike, and the Operator is a lot like the Op from Counter-Strike. I think they've done something really wise here, where the Operator, the Op, you can call it an Op, does seem like there's probably some thought into that. Even the Marshal and the Scout have similarities. You know, if you look up the definitions of the two words, they both have like that military officer type vibe. So I even think that there's probably some ties you could draw there between the Marshal and the Scout and Counter-Strike. So see that. And then the heavies, you know, we don't really use those in CS, like the, you know, different machine guns, but maybe they actually do have some viability here. And so that kind of breaks down all down. Then you have your abilities. I imagine you buy these. In the screenshot that we have, they're already full, so I guess you couldn't really buy them. So yeah, I imagine that it might either be similar cost to weapons, but lower, obviously, but maybe from the same economy pool, or maybe you have to spend points. I see down here that 5 points are needed to get this one skill, so maybe it's a separate pool of economy that you pull from to get these things. But again, these are like your utility in Counter-Strike, and we'll go through some of the characters in a minute. I also think that they cleaned up the idea of how you pass weapons to your teammates. Instead of having to buy it yourself and drop it to a teammate by actually physically tossing it to them, they have a cleaner version of doing it in this game by actually requesting weapons and then just being able to simply click and buy that weapon for your teammate. Not have to worry about buying a gun, throwing it, buying yourself a gun. It just takes up a little bit more time. Which it seems like the buying time in the prep phase, where you actually get to move across the map up until that there's that barrier that cuts you off from progressing. It seems like those two time limits are tied together, so being able to more quickly buy things might really help that process if they are indeed tied together. I'm not 100% sure, but it looked like they were based on some of the footage I've seen, but that can always change. One other thing I'll say is I like that they have all the stats for the weapons just like right here for you to see, as far as, you know, the damage to the body and the head and the leg, and, you know, the fire rate and the capacity. All those things are right here on the screen, so you can very quickly learn about every weapon and never have to second guess exactly how much damage it does. You'll totally know right off the bat. So you learn a lot from this. You see the similarities to Counter-Strike, but you see some unique twists and turns that are also take place for this game. Now, when we look at characters, I'm looking at this from PC Gamer. Just give them credit for this. You know, we look at all the different characters that we have for this game. There's several out already. First off, you have Phoenix, who's the guy with the orange coat that everyone's been talking about. He has the hot hands, which is basically a Molotov. So again, you see that similarity to Counter-Strike in other games, to be fair. I keep saying Counter-Strike, but there's a lot of FPS shooters that have, you know, smoke grenades and flashbangs and different things of that nature, but I'm going to make that comparison, obviously. Then you have Blaze, which is summoning a wall of fire that blocks vision and hurts. So it's like a smoke grenade that also does damage if you actually walk through it. So it's like a smoke and a Molotov combined almost. So that's kind of neat. You have the curveball, which is a flashbang that curves around corners. Now, this is pretty interesting because it means you don't have to necessarily maybe be as accurate as banking flashes off of certain surfaces to get the trajectory that you want. But I'm sure there's still also going to be some type of skill to curving it. To still be accurate. So this will be interesting to see how you can use this as a flashbang. So this guy has like a full utility set, basically, between doing damage, being able to block vision, and being able to flash people. Like, that's a pretty sick skill set to have, pretty well rounded. Then he has this run it back alt, which lets you kind of go back to where you came from, heal up, even if you die. You get to respawn there, so that's kind of a neat alt. This does bring up the point, though, about the ability of being resurrected. There's a couple of different ways that can happen, it seems like, in this game. I'm not sure how I feel about that as a skill. It just seems a little bit too powerful. Hopefully you at least get notified that someone was revived, so at least you know what you're up against. I'm sure you probably do. But yeah, I kind of wonder if this is maybe a bit too much. I think it's fine as long as it can't be used that often. Like maybe once a half or maybe twice a half or something like that. Otherwise, I just think it gets to be too much. But again, haven't played the game, don't know enough about it to make too much of a comment. That's just kind of my first take. Then we have Jet. We've seen a lot of her in the different footage. You know, she has her own version of a smoke grenade. She has the updraft, which is basically like a self-boost in Counter-Strike to get you on top of things, or different areas where you can kind of be a little bit more hidden, like ninja locations and stuff like that. Then you have the tailwind, which is a dash, which you can either use to quickly push into something and get a timing on someone a bit better for a pick, but also you could use it as an evade or just to quickly rotate, just add a little bit of speed to your movement, which can have a lot of different utility in a lot of different situations. And then the Blade Storm, which is wielding the knives that you can throw for damage and all that good stuff. So that's pretty cool. Then Viper. She has a lot of stuff that does AoE damage, it seems like. She has like the pool of acid, which can be similar to a Molotov, I guess you could say, but then has all these different like smoke screens that do damage, block vision, gives her the advantage in certain like, you know, close quarter situations. So she has a lot of skills that kind of sync up to do some similar things. Definitely, again, you see a lot of skills for each of these characters that do some type of vision blocking like a smoke grenade would do in Counter-Strike or other FPS shooters. So you see that a lot. Then you have Sova, which has a lot of stuff that does AoE damage on impact, but also has like a similar type of thing to like Hanzo and Overwatch, where it's like the sonic arrow that can, you know, radar blip wherever it lands. So definitely see some of that. And this comes to a point now as well about skills that let you see where people are, because there's a lot of that. You know, there's characters that have drones, there's characters that have other types of abilities that let you kind of maybe see through a smoke grenade and see where people are. Now, supposedly a lot of these skills you have to have line of sight, so you can't just straight up see someone through a wall. Obviously, if you fly a drone into a certain area, you're going to be able to see where they are. But a lot of the like wall hack skills are supposed to only be with line of sight. Still, I wonder if this is maybe a bit too powerful. I think it all depends on how long some of these smoke grenades last, because when I saw some of Jet Smoke's from the videos, it doesn't seem like they last that long, very reminiscent of a smoke grenade in CS, but there were some of these walls I would see, and I don't know if this is just me and how the footage was displayed, but it looked like they lasted forever, like for a really long time. Maybe it was an alt that lasted for a really long time. It was just like this cloud of smoke up for ages, like it just never went away. And I guess if you're going to have that feature as part of one of these skills that creates that vision block, then you would almost kind of have to have something that scans through it just so you could safely progress. So there's a little bit of give and take on that, and I'm just kind of curious to see how that all plays out. I don't want to have too strong of an opinion about these wall hack skills or, you know, these abilities to scout and use drones and to resurrect. Like, I don't want to give too critical of a critique against those until I see how it plays out, but I am at least cautious about those types of skills. Then you have Cypher, who apparently is going to be able to lay these different types of traps that can reveal people as well as slow them down or stop them from progressing. And, you know, all those different things, these remote cameras. So, again, a lot of things that can do tracking and do reconnaissance and do scouting. And it kind of gives me some Rainbow Six vibes in that way, how you can do some of those types of things. And I'm sure they're pulling influence from a lot of different games that are in a similar genre to this one. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of that. And then, you know, we move on to Brimstone, who also has an incendiary grenade that's similar to the hot hands of Phoenix. Also has a beacon that gives someone a nearby boost of speed of their fire rate. So that's kind of different from some of the other characters. It's kind of unique. I'm kind of curious to see how valuable that would be. Then he has the sky switch, so you can just call down. So that's pretty ridiculous that some of the other characters you have to kind of throw it or place it, whereas this guy can just call them down into multiple locations. That's a pretty strong smoking ability. And then he has an orbital strike that can do, you know, targeting and doing damage, right? Then you have Sage, which has these different orbs that can slow people down, an impassable wall. So not only does it block vision, but it stops you from progressing. You have healing abilities, all these different things. And then Omen, we don't really know too much about. Has a lot of neat little like teleports and clones and stealth type options. So it'll be curious to see what all comes out of that. But next, we're actually going to take a look at a little bit of gameplay, and I'll kind of just make some comments about what I see. So now we're actually just looking at the footage that is on the Valorant official YouTube. I took my cam out just to make it easier to see, and I'll just kind of do some stops throughout the video. So first off, when you look at this UI, it looks very familiar to most FPSs. Nothing really to see here too much. You can see that this person is running with their knife out. So again, very similar vibe to many different games, particularly Counter-Strike, where pulling that out lets you move a bit faster. And then you also see that there probably is going to be a lot of crosshair customizability. I've seen a couple different crosshairs in different footages, so definitely can tell that you're going to be able to have a lot of ability to customize all those sorts of things, which is quite nice. Showing off the buy your teammate a weapon feature, which again is a lot cleaner than dropping a weapon. Now, this bomb site that we're seeing here looks a lot like Tuscan. It looks so much like Tuscan, the B-bomb site. You know, this being Banana that he's walking towards right now, with the force field that's up, and just the layout of this site is very reminiscent of something like Tuscan or CPL Mill from Counter-Strike. If you're familiar with those maps, this area looks like one of the storage units from Mill or Tuscan, like SA2 or SA1 or what have you. So you can see everyone just kind of spreading out. That is one thing that is different about this, by the way, is that you kind of are able to move across the map before the round actually starts, and you can take these more advanced positions that you're seeing up here. The offense can do the same thing up to a certain limit, so that is definitely something that's a bit different. It changes the timings, it changes how quickly you can attack something. It necessitates needing to have some scouting information, whether that be with a drone or something like that, to quickly figure out if they've all stacked on one side of the map in the preparation phase to be able to really quickly push something. So that is different. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Again, I'd have to play it to get a feel for the pacing, but it's certainly really odd to see them go at the approach of being able to like move around the map early. They also have 3 bomb sites instead of 2. It's also a bit different. I feel like I've heard some rumors that some maps do have only 2 bomb sites and some maps have 3, so it seems like there's going to be some variability in that. but we're just seeing that this looks like the op or the scout or something like that. Again, this is what I was talking about with ADS back there. But yeah, see, they're pushing like Banana into SA2. Like, that's what I'm thinking whenever I watch this clip. If you know Counter-Strike and you know Tuscan or Mill, this looks very reminiscent of that. There's that kind of slight wall hack feature. You have to have line of sight, though, but I'm just not quite sure how I feel about that again. Kind of already mentioned that. It just... I don't know. But again, also, let's kind of go back here really quick. As he runs back, this looks like you're running back up Banana to the B-bomb site on Tuscan again. This heaven area up here at the high-low, again, very, very reminiscent of what you would see on Tuscan. And so, yeah, as you see it, again, the movement speed, the way the UI looks, the way the crosshair is, the way some of the weapons respond, all feels very much like CS. But then you have these added features like this drone type thing, which again could be maybe similar to droning in Rainbow Six or something along those lines. This, whatever this skill is, this is weird. It really blankets things. I think this must be like one of Venom's, maybe it's Venom's alt or something, but it covers vision for a super long time. And yeah, I mean, you're just kind of getting a feel for things. You're seeing some of these different skills. That was an attempt to maybe radar and see some stuff. And actually, they were able to see a couple people with all of that as they try to attack in to do a little bit of a retake here, a little bit of close quarters battling. Again, just a lot of CS feel to really how this whole retake situation is taking place, how everything looks, how people are attacking each other. Movement speed seems even a bit slower than something like CSGO, though, and I've already heard some people kind of say that. But yeah, it provides that kind of roller coaster ride pacing of are you to get the fuse or not, and the pressures and the tension of retaking, and you can see it's called a spike instead of a bomb, which again is just kind of smart to brand it that way to get away from the whole kind of terrorism and counterterrorism issue that Counter-Strike can have with some sponsors and such, which I've certainly heard about. So yeah, this is really cool footage. If you haven't seen it already, definitely go check out the Valorant YouTube channel. I'm sure you have. And so, yeah, I mean, that's really the bulk of what I wanted to talk about, just kind of show a little bit of how I felt about the game, how they're setting it up. Again, just to kind of conclude, you see a lot of Counter-Strike vibes throughout this game, whether it be, you know, the UI, how the weapons work, the economy system, the buy menu, some of the map design and layout, as well as just straight up some of the bomb sites reminded me of bomb sites I've seen from different Counter-Strike maps. You know, the crosshair customizability, the way that they section off weapons, some of the abilities remind you of utility from Counter-Strike. So there's so many CS vibes in this game, which, again, I expected, given that Volcano has been working on this game for the last 5 years. I mean, this game has been in the making for a very long time. I think it was already in the making before Volcano even joined. I think he got officially hired, almost 5 years ago. So this game has really been through the works, and it looks really good. I mean, this is alpha footage, so there's no telling maybe how much better the game has gotten before we'll actually get our hands on a closed beta. Some people will complain about the art style being a bit cartoony, but I think that's kind of what I expected, you know, given some of the other games that Riot has made. I don't have any issue with that. You know, for me, I don't care about the name. I don't necessarily care about the branding. I don't even care about aesthetics. I just care about how it feels. How does it play? You know, is it something where you get rewarded for good mechanics and good skills and good aim and good timing and good decision making? Does it feel fluid? Does it feel smooth? Are you getting good frames? Are you not dealing with like stuttering or clipping or feeling like you're walking in quicksand? You know, those are the types of things that I care about most, and I can't really tell those things from just watching video, but it seems like some people that I've known from the CS scene and such that have touched it do, you know, feel like the game does have those kind of vibes to it, but like a slower version of CSGO, kind of harkening back to CS 1.6 and how you can't really get away with jiggle peeking as much, or these wide swings, or these faster paced movements, unless you're using some type of ability or something like that kind of in conjunction with it, or you're getting support from a teammate. So definitely a lot of those vibes. So I really like what I'm seeing. I think it has that nice, you know, mix and match of Counter-Strike mechanics and philosophy, but adding those types of like MOBA elements, you know, some of those class-based shooter elements, but not going so heavy-handed on how powerful and how important some of those skills and alts really are, though it's yet to be seen how often you get to use some of these skills, and some of the skills do irk me a bit, but I want to play the game first and see how they work before I pass too much judgment and really critique it too harshly. But certainly there are some cautions and concerns, of course. But all in all, I think it looks pretty good, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. You know, as far as this being a Counter-Strike killer, no chance. I mean, I think that Counter-Strike is just more of a pure tactical FPS, whereas this game, again, adds more of those class-based shooter elements, which some people are going to like and see as a breath of fresh air, or are really going to take to. They're going to take to the lore of the game and the story of all the characters and all the diversity that the characters are going to bring to the table when it comes to storylines. Some people are really going to want to sink their teeth into that, but some people just want to play a shooter that is just a shooter, where there is no heroes, there are no skills. It's just straight up, an FPS. And so Counter-Strike is in a great place right now. It's somehow growing player count, even, this many years deep, or almost 8 years deep into Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and it's still picking and getting new peak player counts and hitting new viewership records. And I can't see it being rocked by this. I think the games that are most likely going to be rocked by this are going to be other free FPSs like a Crossfire, or like some of these ABA, like some of these other games, particularly in the Asian region, are probably some of the ones that are going to be rocked the most. I think Zorine, is someone out in the esports community who's done a lot, really smartly pointed this out, and so I want to give her credit because I think that she's spot on. That's probably going to be a big one. Other than that, I think that this will probably draw a lot of disillusioned Overwatch players who don't like that it's so alt in like skills dependent and not a classic shooter. Like it leans too much in the MOBA direction. I think it'll also, catch people who maybe weren't able to hit like the Overwatch League level as far as how competitive they were and how good they were. It'll attract those people to play this game to have another chance at being a top level pro in an esport. Same could be said for people who have been like brushing around the Mountain Dew League level in Counter-Strike, who never been able to hit like a top pro team, or players who can't because they've been barred, like someone like Swag, for instance, who's already kind of said that they're interested in Project A. I think it'll draw some of those people. I think it'll attract maybe some Rainbow Six people as well, though I think that game is on a nice positive trajectory, so I doubt it'll rock that one too much. But yeah, I think it'll attract people from a lot of different audiences. Maybe it will even attract people from League or different MOBAs to give it a shot, though I think that they're going to have a really steep learning curve. But all in all, I think this game is probably going to be insanely popular. I think a lot of people are going to play it when it first comes out, and it'll just be whether or not people sink their teeth into it and really get caught up by some of the new dynamics this type of game brings in comparison to Counter-Strike, or whether or not they just want to go back to a game like Counter-Strike, or go back to a game like Rainbow Six, or go back to a game like Overwatch. It'll be interesting to see. But I think that Riot will certainly back this heavily. There's no doubt that there will be a vibrant esports scene for this, and I think it'll have its own nice little place in the market, and I don't think it'll negatively impact Counter-Strike really much at all. Again, I think it'll mostly maybe draw people who just aren't a part of the top scene, if anything. I think all the top pros, top players and such are not going to really, they'll play it for fun, maybe to stream it, maybe just as a change of pace, but they're not going to switch careers or something like that, right? As far as broadcast talent goes, it just depends on how Riot treats it. Are they going to treat it more of like a freelance operation where people are allowed to work in multiple games and it's no big deal? Or are they going to want to tie talent in to like, fuller time contracts that kind of bar them from doing other things? Not really sure how it'll go. I certainly imagine that almost every broadcast talent is going to be interested in this game to some degree. Now, whether or not they actually want to pursue it is a different story. I'm sure they'll at least be intrigued. And it'll just, I think a lot of Counter-Strike commentators, Call of Duty commentators, Overwatch commentators, commentators from Battle Royale games, like I think everyone's going to have some interest in this. And we'll just have to see how things go down. As far as my interest in the game, I got to play it first. I got to see if I actually like the game. But so far, what I see, I do like. And look, I would be stupid not to consider it. If you're trying to make a career out of esports, particularly as a broadcaster, you have to be able to be flexible and do more than one game. And I've been waiting for that moment to finally get into a second game. I haven't really been able to do that yet. I'm really looking for that option, and this one looks like a really great option if indeed it plays well and I enjoy it, and if I can somehow find my way in, like I would certainly love to pursue it. Does this mean I'm going to go up on Counter-Strike? No, I'll still do Counter-Strike content. I'll still accept Counter-Strike gigs if they come my way. But to be honest, it's been a little bit slow on that front. So if you're a fan of mine and you're watching this and you're kind of curious my thoughts on it, yeah, I'm interested in working in this game, probably as a commentator or desk analyst or, what have you, or doing content, but I have to play it first to make sure I really enjoy it. But at first glance, I can definitely see this being something that I could really get into, but I still don't think I would ever leave Counter-Strike behind. I guess it would depend on if I had to or something, if a certain type of offer was made, I'd have to really consider it. But all in all, definitely interesting stuff. Hope you folks enjoyed this video. I just wanted to kind of give my take on what I've been seeing out there from this kind of first release of information for Valorant, and kind of give you that perspective of, a broadcaster, someone who's heavily ingrained in the Counter-Strike community, and just kind of give you that take. And yeah, hope you folks enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe for more content. I do a lot of Counter-Strike content here if you're into Counter-Strike, but also I can see myself doing a lot of content about this game as well as more information comes out and as I can get my hands on the game, which I'm not sure when that'll be. But yeah, stay tuned.